Hey y'all, welcome back to another What's for Dinner video. I hope that my voice sounds okay. I feel like I sound super echoey. I'm standing in an empty room right now. I'm currently in the process of getting rid of a lot of stuff. But anyways, this is a special video because it is in collaboration with two other amazing ladies, and that is Kelly from Kelly's Corner and Missy from Love Missy XO. I cannot say enough good things about both of these ladies. I have followed them both for quite a while now, and I think they put out awesome content. They have the best personalities, and they cook the same types of foods that I do. So I'm constantly getting great ideas from them, and I would love it if you guys would go and watch their What's for Dinner video after you click out of this one. I will have them both linked down below in my description box, and I'm sure between all three of us, you are going to have all the dinner inspiration, and you should be set for your next meal plan. So like I said, hopefully you'll check them out, go show them some love, and maybe you'll even subscribe to their channel. If you are coming over here from there, hello and welcome. I am Kristen, obviously, and I would love it if you would consider subscribing to my channel if you like what you see. So that's all I have to say. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys what I had cooking over this past week. Okay, so first up, I made these buffalo chicken stuffed peppers, and oh my goodness, y'all, these are a must make for sure. So the first thing that I did was take two green peppers that I, of course, washed pretty well, and then I sliced those down the middle, and then I'm just going to take out the insides. This was a little bit trickier than I thought it would be, but nothing too crazy. This was my first time doing like stuffed peppers, so I just ran a knife around the edges and then just kind of pulled out what was in the middle. And then I did end up taking out like a big spoon just to kind of scrape out more of the middle and to get out as many seeds as I could. There were still a few remaining, but if you didn't want that, you could of course run it under some water to get the rest of those out. And then I just placed those into the bottom of a casserole dish, and then I preheated my oven to 350 degrees. Meanwhile, I got started on the filling. So I'm just taking an 8-ounce block of cream cheese, adding that to a mixing bowl, and I just popped that in my microwave for like 40 seconds so that it would be easier to stir. And then I'm going to be using a rotisserie chicken. This is a great time saver for those busy nights. And I'm just going to simply remove that skin, pull that chicken from the bones, and just shred it up and toss it into that mixing bowl. Next, I'm just going to be adding in some hot sauce. I have two different kinds here because I didn't think that I would have enough of the Franks, but luckily I had just enough. So I'm just going to drizzle that over the chicken, and then I'm going to add in some of this Hidden Valley ranch seasoning. If y'all have been with me for a while, y'all know this is a staple in my house. I use it on so many things. And then last, but definitely not least, I shredded up some sharp cheddar cheese, and I'm just going to add some of that on in there. Stir all this together and then stuff this inside those peppers. These turned out so delicious. Definitely a new favorite. I am buffalo chicken obsessed, and this is a perfect option for those of you that do low carb. The only thing that I would do different is probably double that baking time for those peppers. They were still quite a bit crunchy, and I knew this when I pulled them out of the oven and kind of tested it with a fork, but honestly, I didn't have any more time to cook these because I had places to be. The next night, I used up the rest of that buffalo chicken filling from the night before. I only ended up using half of that mixture for the peppers, and this is how I chose to use the other half. I turned them into some buffalo chicken taquitos. So I'm just adding a good amount of that mixture to a low-carb tortilla, and then I'm going to sprinkle on some of that sharp cheddar cheese that I shredded up, and I'm just going to roll those up and repeat. Go along with those, I also made some roasted red potatoes. So I, of course, washed and scrubbed the skins really well. And then I am just dicing those up into bite-sized pieces and tossing those onto a large cookie sheet. I drizzle those with a good amount of olive oil. And then the seasoning that I chose to use is this new one. It's this tangy garlic, ranch, and chive seasoning. And I sprinkle that on there pretty generously since that is the only seasoning that I used. And then I just got in there with my hands and tossed all that together to make sure that everything got coated. You could, of course, use a mixing bowl for this and then add it to the cookie sheet, but I didn't want to dirty one up, so this is what I did. And then I'm going to pop that in my oven at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes, I believe. And then I just took those out, tossed those around, and I'm going to scoot those over to the side, spray the bottom with some olive oil cooking spray, and add down those taquitos, spray the top so that they'll get crispy. Then I just pop that back in for an additional 15 minutes. Now, this is my kind of sheet pan meal. And when you do flip those taquitos over, they do look a little more appetizing, as you can see. I just have one of those on my plate, and I sprinkled it with, or drizzled it, I should say, with some ranch, hot sauce, and chives. And then I have those delicious potatoes on the side. This meal was super easy and so good. Next, I'm doing a crock pot meal. I did have to wake up pretty early before work to get this started. So I'm starting off with 4 bone-in pork chops, and I'm just seasoning that with some salt, pepper, onion, and garlic powder. And then I'm going to flip those over and season the other side the same exact way. I have heated up some olive oil into my skillet, and I'm just searing both sides for a few minutes to get that nice brown color and to really lock in the flavor. Meanwhile, once again, I am chopping up some red potatoes that I have washed really good and adding that to the bottom of my crock pot. I didn't end up needing all of those potatoes that I had laid out, so I just put those back. And then I am drizzling this with some olive oil and seasoning those with some salt, plenty of black pepper. Y'all already know, some ranch seasoning. I did add in a good amount of that. And then a big spoonful of minced garlic to get extra flavor. And then I'm just going to toss all of those to coat. Next, I'm going to take those pork chops and just add those to the top. These are not going to be fully cooked, by the way. And then I'm going to spray the tops with some olive oil spray. And I'm just going to go ahead and say I am going to have this recipe linked down below, but I did do this pretty different. Now I'm just adding some apple cider vinegar and some pats of butter, and then I'm going to cook this on low for about 5 hours. Luckily, I only live about 4 to 5 minutes away from work, so I came home on my lunch break and turned this crock pot off. And then when I came home later, I heated it back up and just did some green beans on the side. These potatoes were cooked perfectly, and they were so dang flavorful. They were my favorite thing about this meal. And the pork chops, they were good, but honestly, I expected a little bit more. I just felt they were missing something, but I did end up adding some A1 steak sauce, and then I was happy. Up next is going to be another low-carb option. This is going to be garlic butter steak bites with lemon zucchini noodles. So the first thing I did was cut up this big piece of steak into cubes. I don't remember exactly what type of steak it was, maybe like a top sirloin. And then I'm adding that to a large Ziploc bag. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the marinade. All that was some soy sauce, olive oil, hot sauce, plenty of black pepper, and the juice of half of a lemon. I'm just going to give that a quick stir, and that is going to get poured all over the top of that steak. I'm going to push out as much air as I can out of that bag, seal it up, and massage it into the meat really well. And then I'm just going to let that sit for about 20 minutes while I get started on everything else. So I'm going to be using this frozen spiraled zucchini. I really wanted to use fresh. but Walmart was out and I don't have a spiralizer to do it myself. So I just followed the directions on the back of the package and let that steam for about 15 minutes, I believe it was. And then I drained off the water and set that to a separate bowl. To that same skillet, I'm just adding some olive oil and dumping in that steak. I did have to end up draining off some of that liquid because it was steaming the steak instead of browning it the way that I wanted to. And as you can see, that did the trick. It started to develop that nice brown color. And then I tossed in some butter and let that melt, tossing the steak in that. And then I am going to add in a big scoop of minced garlic. That started to brown really quickly, so I probably only let that go for about 30 seconds, I think it was, before I removed that to a separate plate. I mean, how gorgeous is that? So flavorful. To that same skillet, I am melting down a little bit more butter, and then I'm going to deglaze the pan with some chicken broth. You could use beef broth, veggie broth, whatever you want to. I'm just using what I had in my fridge. And then I'm going to add in that remaining marinade and the juice of that other half of the lemon. And I let that come up to a simmer and I let that reduce down a little bit. And then I toss the zucchini noodles in it. Next time I would definitely add in 2 packages of that. As you see, it was basically nothing, it looks like. I just scooted that over to the side of my skillet and tossed back in that steak. And then lastly, I just sprinkled everything with some parsley. And here is the finished product. There is no words to describe how good this was. The flavors were out of this world. I highly recommend it, and I will for sure be making this again. And this was my first time trying zucchini noodles, and I have to say I really did like them. I didn't think that I would like them with like spaghetti sauce, but the way these were flavored, it was just perfect. Up last, but definitely not least, is this epic baked ziti. This is not your weeknight type of meal. It was kind of time consuming, but trust me, it is worth it. So the first thing I did was brown up 1 pound of ground beef. You could swap this for Italian sausage if that's what you prefer, but this is what we like. At the same time, I started on the pasta, so I brought a large pot of water to a boil, seasoned it with plenty of salt. I couldn't find ziti noodles, but I just used penne noodles. Back to the meat, I'm just seasoning it with some garlic sea salt and some onion powder, and then I'm going to drain that and set it to the side. I wiped out my skillet, and now I'm taking 5 cloves of garlic that I peeled, and I am just mincing that. As y'all know, normally I use the stuff in a jar, which is perfectly fine, but I wanted to be a little more fancy for this recipe. So I added back in that beef and tossed it in with the garlic, and now I am going to season this up with some dried oregano, some dried basil, some kosher salt, and then some black pepper. Now I'm going to be adding in 2 15-ounce cans of tomato sauce. I'm also going to be adding in 1 can of petite diced tomatoes, juice and all. And I'm just going to let this come up to a simmer, turn it down a little bit, and let that cook for about 20 minutes to marry all of those flavors together. Meanwhile, I'm going to crack 2 eggs into a large mixing bowl, take out a fork, and whisk those together really well. I'm going to be using this whole 1 pound container of cottage cheese and just dumping that on in. I'm also going to be taking some fresh Parmesan cheese, and I am just going to shred that on in over the top. You do need about 1 cup of this. I'm also going to be taking half of this block of mozzarella cheese, and I'm just going to cut that up into little cubes and combine all of this together and set that to the side. So back to that sauce, I have turned off the heat, and I'm just adding in a little bit of sugar to cut that acidity, and it is done. Now I am going to be taking some heavy whipping cream and adding that on into that same pot that I boiled the pasta in. I'm going to be adding in 1 teaspoon of cornstarch and whisking that in. And no, you shouldn't use a metal whisk on a nonstick surface, but I couldn't find my silicone one. So once that had thickened in about 4 minutes, I believe, I just added that in on top of the cottage cheese, and then I added in about 1 cup of that red sauce, and then, of course, stirred that together. Then I'm going to take my cooked and drained pasta. I did toss that in a little bit of olive oil to keep it from sticking, and I just mixed it in with that sauce. And now I'm going to pour it into a sprayed 9x13 casserole dish. This was so yummy and comforting. Y'all need this recipe in your life. But that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one.